From CRI Simple Numbers, this is Profitability Playbook, the Simple Numbers Podcast, a podcast for those who champion market growth and anchor the nation's economy, small businesses, and entrepreneurs.
All right, hey there. Welcome to the Simple Numbers Profitability Playbook podcast. You know, I have to write that down every time we do it because I'm surprised I haven't thrown a cuss word in there or something like that. But you all have a good weekend.
Yeah, productive.
Yeah. Well, I was hoping to try to get a tan on this white bod, but it was ended up rainy and I had a little bit of sun there for a little bit. But other than that, pretty low key for me as well. So welcome back. It's been a while since we did one. We had we just could not get the schedule dialed in over the last 30 days. And we finally were able to get together here. So we're back. It's Brandon Gray and the man himself, Greg Crabtree. And we're going to be a little bit on the sales and marketing side today, a little bit of, hey, what do you do? Grow? Do I stay put? One of the things about us is when we're looking for topics in, for the show, what's great is that we're doing calls nonstop all the time. I think I did 20 some last week. It was insane. And I told Brandon this morning, we were texting back and forth, and it's like, hey man, sales, marketing, what do I do around this? I'm not getting a lot of sales. I'm invested in marketing. I'm not getting a return on it. Should I grow? Should I stay put? What do I do here? And obviously it's different across all our clients, but it has been a common theme with several of them, at least for me. And so today we're sort of going to highlight some of those things that we've been talking about. And Greg's actually going to share some slides. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to see the slides, but we will, for our listeners, be talking through it as well. So you sort of get a picture of what we're talking about. But if you want to check out the slides as we're sharing them, please go over to YouTube and check them out. So all right, let's start with you guys. So what if, based on what I said, what have you been seeing there in the sort of the growth trajectory? What should I do? Should I be profitable? Should I grow? What do you guys got for me?
Well, clearly,
Greg's muted.
The situation of where we're at.
There you go, man. Now you're unmuted.
Is for every two companies that are growing, one company is retreating. So that gives you kind of the feed of the market is what we see. And so a lot of those are just dependent. I mean, the companies that are growing, they're generally growing from two things. If you're a necessary business, you're growing in revenue because you're able to pass through price increases, far greater than what the government reports in inflation. So just, the government's number is a manufacturer number, and I think everybody knows that. But the real number is still pretty hefty. The other growth that we're seeing are where companies are taking over true market share from failing competitors. And so, and you've got to analyze that growth differently, because in an expanding market where you can sit back and plot a 5-year sales plan, 10-year growth plan, and all those kind of things, when you're taking on market share, that's a growth that doesn't repeat in growth. It repeats in business, but it doesn't grow again. And so one of my clients grew at 20%, this past year. Great, but they're under no delusion, that they're going to repeat that growth, because once they got that extra business from their failing competitors, their market is actually relatively flat, if not slightly declining. Then you've got the discretionary businesses that, the one out of every three that is not growing and is actually retreating in about the 17% average pace is what we've seen. And I think those businesses are now kind of finding their footing of where is the bottom, where is the minimum level of demand. And so as we continue, we'll have an update here, probably we'll do another podcast here in a couple of weeks, with the latest data through the April data that we see. But based on all the models that we see every day, I think we're in this muddling sense of the market between now and November. And as I'd like to try to remind everybody, I don't care who wins in November from a standpoint of analysis. The other side's probably going to fight it or complain or challenge it. And I think where we have to stand at the moment is I continue to just pound the drum of we've got to get the hay in the barn through the rest of this year up until November. And then we've just got to see how things play out. Now, if you want to make a big bet, go for it. I mean, if you want to pick, the highest rated return on bet horse at the Kentucky Derby, hey, that's your money. You can put it to the center of the table and roll the dice and go for it. I kind of like better odds myself. And so I think when the market settles out, and so I think from the standpoint of in seeing how things play out, I think the thing to keep in mind is the government is the major driver of the economy. And so when the government becomes financially dysfunctional, there's not continuances of projects even committed, funding is held up, debt ceiling fights are occurring, when all of that becomes a little bit questionable and unstable, then it affects everybody. So just understand, you may not be a government contractor, but the government spending patterns do affect all of us. And so just gotta understand that, that's coming. So then in all of the presentations, that we're doing right now, it really is this aspect of we're going, okay, well, how do we look at our business? And so what I'm going to do is show you kind of a couple of slides. If you're listening to this without the slides, I suggest, this is one that I do in a lot of my talks. And so, certainly go check it out, on YouTube if you're not listening to it. But essentially, I use these two companies that, first I show the business engine of the company. So these are two water damage businesses, and one of them, just does mitigation of water damage claims and goes out, cleans stuff up, and then leaves. The other one said, hey, like a true entrepreneur, hey, we're there. Let's play general contractor, and we can just pick up a bunch of revenue from fixing things. Because, what does it take? A pickup truck and a cell phone, and I can go be a general contractor. I think people learn pretty quickly it's not that easy, especially the good GCs. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so company one, $2 million of revenue, created $1.8 million in gross margin. Remember, as we always say, gross margin is the true economic top line of the business. Company two, $3.8 million. And so they meet up at a trade show, and the company two is telling company one, hey, you ought to do what we're doing. You can be twice as big. Well, just be careful, how big a boy are you? Because, once you slice out those cost of goods sold, they're only $1,995,000, roughly $2 million of gross margin compared to 1.8 million of the other company. And so that's kind of your first clue of this may not be as good as you think. They've got the same relative amount of direct labor relative to gross margin. So direct labor efficiency of gross margin divided by direct labor, they're getting $3.66 of gross margin per direct labor dollar in company one. They're getting $3.78 in company two. So they're pretty even, from that standpoint. But I always ask this question of every group. Once I've explained it that way, and certainly I'm leading them to the conclusion, but I say, which company would you rather be? I haven't shown you the profit number. I haven't shown you the operating expenses. But just intuitively, as a business owner, which company would you rather be? $3.8 million with $1,467,000 of contribution margin, or would you rather be $2 million of top line revenue with $1,317,000? And everybody looks at that and they go, oh, company one. We want to be the smaller business with a better margin percentage. And that is intuitively the right answer, but it is the answer that we don't chase in the light of business every day. And so as you go through that, you say, okay, well, let's look at the next slide. And the next slide shows the true profitability of the businesses. I guarantee you, the more activity you put on the top line of revenue, the more operating costs that it takes to turn it over and make it happen without failure. And so therefore, naturally, you got almost $1.3 million of operating expenses for the company two, and $1,042,000, for company one. So really about, $240,000 more operating expenses, which just sucks the profitability out. So company one is more profitable. They make $274,000 of profit on $2 million of revenue, versus company two is only making $185,000 of profit on $3.8 million. Now, company two is still profitable, but it's below those minimum profit levels that we talk about in simple numbers. So they're at 9% profit to gross margin. The other company is right at that 15% profit to gross margin that we talk about. Company one, which is operating perfectly. Remember, we've always talked about that key number, the number two. Remember, you got to remember number two. They're $2 overall labor efficiency. When you take gross margin of $1.8 million divided by all labor, which is direct labor plus management labor, they're getting $2.14. That's the magic number, people. I mean, it's not rocket science. But the other company's only getting $1.80, and that shows that they are not getting enough out of their labor. So if we go into this, and this is really kind of the point of what we want to talk about today, because there's a lot of things that go into this. We say, listen, at the end of the day, you got to get profitable with what you got. I mean, when we've got a short sight of market conditions that we're facing right now, you got to get profitable with what you got. Why would you grow something that's not profitable? Unless you're at the beginning stage of an investment. I get that, but if you're grinding and it's not happening, you got to do some cutting. So you either cut to get profitable, you either grow to get profitable and grow into your cost, or you got to do a blend of the two. And so the fun one is always, well, let's grow into it. And so company one, they're at that, what I call the beginning stage of entrepreneurial mitosis. And so, I checked this with my wife. She's the biology major in the house, so I was just the accountant. So mitosis is the point in which a cell splits into two cells. So you're a single cell amoeba, as an entrepreneur until you get to about that 2 million stage. And then now you got to split into either an entity, you as the leader of the business have to focus on marketing and sales, or you got to focus on operations. The one thing we keep seeing it over and over in the data, the entrepreneurs that gravitate to operations versus marketing and sales have a tendency to get stuck and not grow, because it is so hard to hire sales talent that will drive the business forward. It's not impossible, but it's rare. And so good luck. It's I don't care how good you are or what your plans are, it's just tough to do. And if you found that one, just count yourself lucky. But if you can hire operations talent, there's an old adage in baseball, you shake a tree and out falls 9 gloves and 1 bat. They'll find a place for the bat to play in the field and hide their fielding deficiencies, because bats are rare. Gloves, a lot of good fielders that can't hit their weight. So that in business, it's you shake a tree and out falls 1 salesperson and 19 operators. That's about the differential that we see, in the marketplace. And especially, it used to be about 1 to 10, but now sales talent has really kind of disappeared because we've gotten lazy. The market was so hot. We were getting so many gifts of the market sales in the last 20 years that sales talent has really just kind of disappeared. And you're going to have to probably train it. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the cures to this, at the end, but just to set the table of that thing. So let's go back to the numbers. And so you're going to add $100,000, in management labor to the company that's growing. And so you go from $350,000 of management labor to $450,000. And this is kind of where our modeling technique really helps you kind of do what we call bottom up targeting. So we're going to start with the labor. You take the 450 times, we know what the target management labor efficiency is, so we can back into contribution margin, we can back into direct labor, we can back into gross margin target. And so as you go through this, essentially, we can prove that to keep all things relative in that model, now that it's kind of formed itself, and it's going to stay pretty much in those patterns, that you got to get $600,000 of top line revenue to add that $100,000 of an operations manager. Now, here's a little side point I will say. I didn't say COO. I said operations manager. Please, 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 please quit using the C titles for people that don't earn them. Matter of fact, if you're under $10 million of revenue, I'm going to argue that there's probably not any C positions in your business, including yours. So you're just hammering yourself with overpaying labor, for people that you're giving too high of a title to. They're going online, checking their wage survey, and you're just, I'm not saying there can't be, but there's not likely, and unfortunately I can say this in a generic sense, and I'm not hurting anybody's feelings, but there again, you're not a C title. And so it's an operations manager.
Or VP. No VP.
Or VP. I
That's my favorite one. The vice president was a popular one there for a while.
Yeah. I've got a large client in Australia that does about $100 million of revenue, and the owner of the business does not call himself the CEO. He calls himself a director. So, and he's a great guy. So there again, be careful with titles, just to say. So anyway, you put the $100,000 in there, you go, it's a 6-to-1 ratio. Now the thing is, I don't write a check for 100 because I'm paying that person $8,333 a month. And I don't need to get $600,000 of revenue overnight. I need to get $50,000 more a month. That starts to become, and I'll give you 3-4 months, to grow into that capability. But it's an easy target to calculate and set. And if it doesn't work, you've got to be willing to back up, cut that position out, and move on. And here's the good thing. If you have to cut that position, you got some egg on your face and, you feel bad, and that person's going to find another job right now. There's nobody functionally that's unemployed, in terms of they may not have the job they want, but they can find a job to feed their family. And so there's no excuse to kind of hold on to a bad fit and paying for labor that really is not needed, in the business model. So this is the easy one. This is the one where everything works and everybody loves that. This is where those 1 out of every 3 businesses that we're dealing with right now are facing the harshness, but this is what you have to do. The first thing, we already determined, and this is what our data is telling us as well. The businesses that are down 17% are cutting direct labor, and sometimes they're even getting higher labor efficiency ratios from their direct labor, which worries me a bit because I think they're pushing their direct labor and trying to hold on to management labor that they should have cut. But
hey, Greg, real quick on that.
In this case, we do the analysis on this one and we say, listen, the problem's not in the direct labor piece. You got fine direct labor. You got to cut management labor. And we know that we got to, instead of a 252 management LER, you got to get a 376 because we've got another pattern to base it off of. And so we back into that number. And so you got $192,000, which amazingly, see how the simple math works? It takes them from $1.80 overall labor efficiency to a 2.17, just like the other company. Voila. It's like, as I said, it's not rocket science. And so you got $192,000. Well, what do? Well, you take everybody in the management labor bucket, you write down their salary on a sheet of paper and you line them up. And you stand there and you count it up until you get to $192,000 of labor that if it didn't show up tomorrow, we can still operate. And I know that's easy for me to say, but it actually is how you've got patterns of other successful businesses that are able to do it with that right amount of labor. And you can tell yourself all day long that, we can't do it. We can't. Yes, you can. And yes, you need to, because that's all the labor your business model is giving you at the moment. And the more that you hold on to excess labor, the longer it's going to be that you're going to have a deficient model. So we present that, and everybody comes back and says, "Oh, no, we're growing. We're going to grow into it." Really? Okay. Well, I'll do the calculation, but you tell me if it's right. And so we go back to the calculation and say, okay, well, I'm going to let you grow into it. So we're going to keep the $582,000 of management labor, And then we're going to do the calculation upwards to say, so if you keep all the management labor that's in place, you've got to grow contribution margin from $1,467,000 to 2.1 million, or almost 2.2 million. I can't do that with the same direct labor. I got to add direct labor ratably because we've already established the direct labor rates is fine. And once you work your way all the way to the top, it takes $2 million of revenue at the current rates of profitability to then justify and get back to the and guess what? When we work all those rates in, guess what? Total labor efficiency comes back to a 2.14. But to say that you're going to grow 2 million on the top line and give out no additional compensation to your management team is just, you're just in la la land. I mean, it's not going to happen. And so what are you going to do about it? And the reality is you could probably, do a little of both and try to cut and grow. But this is mostly a cut scenario, in that process. But when you're looking at these issues and you've got to make changes, whether it's growing your business but if you're cutting or trying to grow or you can't grow into it, it's either, is it people, is it pricing, or is it process? And it's many times a little bit of all three, in that process. But you change a lot by, adjusting the people factor. And I know that's the one where all of us get our ego, caught up in it. But, we're in a time now where there's not a lot of energy in a lot of there's a third of the market. There's no energy for you to grow into it, I guess. And so that's why you've got to assess the market, look at what's there, and decide, is there available growth in my market? And if there is, and you're not capturing it, okay, well, I still probably have a people problem. Do I have the right people? And then I've got a process problem more than likely. And then I probably have a pricing problem as well, and am I really getting the price that I need? And we see that, every day in terms of our clients that, are busy, they're full up, and you go, well, if you're full up, there's no room in the schedule for the next customer, you're probably not charging enough. So what are you doing? I mean, you're just giving it away. And so those are the two out of the three that are growing, and they can raise those prices, and do that. But that you've got to understand, which of these groups do you fit in, and then what is your activity? And as we said, kind of setting up, the discussion is, are you pricing effectively? Are you selling effectively? As we talked about, one of the things that I mentioned was, we've really seen this disappearance of sales talent over the last 20 years because we didn't need salespeople to get a lead across the threshold. You just needed to take their order. Market's a little finicky right now. It needs somebody to get it across the finish line. And you're going to have to commit to sales training. You're going to have to really dig into your process, and you're going to have to get really, 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 good, at assessing your market conditions and figuring out where the fish biting and where we're going to risk dropping our bait, to go win those customers. All right. So we'll open it up. You guys weigh in on kind of your thoughts on that.
All right, I think we got our audio back now. So like Greg was saying, you have to evaluate the marketplace right now in terms of, is it going to allow me to grow? And when I say allow to grow, like we mentioned, it's about, can I go steal market share? And if you say, yes, I can steal market share, the most critical factor there is you've got to evaluate your current team in terms of, are they deal makers or deal takers? And the marketplace is flooded right now with salespeople who were benefactors of a really nice run of the economy. And so they're deal takers. They could write up the deal, they could follow through with the call and what have you. And there was 10 more in line behind that current customer that wanted services or wanted a product. There's much fewer deal makers. And that's the big thing you got to kind of go out and find. And so as you look at your current team, can they make the deal or can they just take the deal? And if you got a group of deal takers, good luck. You're going to struggle to grow. The other thing you got to look at is if you are in a marketplace to where stealing market share is going to be really difficult. Either you're more so along those lines of a discretionary type of business than a necessity business, or you look at your team and you go, I just don't know that we've got the horses to be, deal makers from that standpoint. That's where you got to really start to evaluate what everyone on the admin management team is doing. Like Greg said, our data shows that companies have done a decent job of getting their direct labor to be in a line to current activity. For the most part, everybody's watching that. We're seeing that number on direct labor efficiency be fairly strong. Where everybody is just tanking is the admin management labor efficiency. And so it's kind of that thing of, is your team looking busy? Do you have activity or do you have accomplishment? And so everybody hates to hear this next part, but you really have to have your admin management team start tracking their time. I need to know what you're working on and how much time it's taking. And then from there, we can determine, okay, what's our best course of action? That kind of gives you the details and the information that you need as you start to dig into that team. Let's say you do arrive at the solution that, hey, we're going to have to cut a little bit in order to survive and play ball for another day. There's a couple things we're going to start to look at there. So the first is going to be, how difficult is it going to be to replace this position? If it's a position and there's 5 of them in the entire country that can go out and do that, I might be motivated to hang on to them from that standpoint versus someone that I can go and I can hire all day and twice on Sunday. Then the second criteria that I'm going to look at is going to be, what type of knowledge do they have of internal systems and processes, operations, kind of just that IQ around the business that's really difficult to replace with new talent. And so I kind of use those 2 buckets to evaluate, along with capacity of what we have for them to do. And sure, everybody might just have to suck it up for a year or 2, take on some extra tasks, get rid of the low value work that they were doing. That's why you track the time from that standpoint. And a lot of times you find the answer is, 2 steps forward, half a step back. And what I mean by that is we reduce by an expensive managerial position, and we offboard some of the low value tasks to more of an administrative assistant type of position to get the most bang for the buck overall.
Yeah, and I noticed too, when it comes to the cutting scenario, especially when I look at the 100 company model and I see the reduction in direct labor, we often talk about what happened, if you look at the 100 company model, and as a percentage, you don't see much difference from December of 2019. And a lot of the principles that were in place during 2019, we got away from 2020 to 2023, where, again, gifts of the market, just like Greg was saying, where you could, sales were flowing in, money was going all over the place in the market. We saw, and hey, we're probably a little guilty of it to a point of, hey, you had to get a labor was available. If you got a couple good ones, you might have hired ahead. And we see people reducing the labor now, and it's some of that, hey, are we getting rid of now some of that unproductive labor, right? Back to the efficiency side of things of going, hey, you know what, that person, I actually don't need them. I can combine tasks, we're a little overstaffed. To the marketing spend of, we have some people that were just spending money on marketing and it was coming in and not really realizing that, hey, we had some inefficient marketing spend. And I noticed on the cut scenario, and I show my clients it, oh, wow, they really reduced marketing over there. And it's like, well, they're reducing some of that inefficiencies that was either too expensive and not getting that return on investment they needed out of it, or it just wasn't working for them and at all. But they were unable to notice that. And so cutting out some of those inefficiencies across the board in your business that we got away from for the last few years is a good thing to look at that. And then on the growth side, I noticed too is the relationship of sales and marketing. The companies that are growing that I work with have a really good marketing to sales relationship. And back to the salespeople, where, listen, some salespeople out there are great salespeople, but they came from maybe an industry or a company where that marketing and sales were aligned really well. And you oftentimes find yourself maybe hiring, oh, this salesperson's so great, they're just going to go get it. And then they might fail for you. And mainly because the marketing apparatus behind your business. So as you grow and scale, make sure you continue to monitor that marketing to sales relationship to give those salespeople, the boost they need out in the market.
Well, and I think you've got to take that and kind of slice it into, everybody has a different problem they're solving. I mean, we got
Sure.
B2B, you got B2B clients that you've got to, somehow pierce the high tower, to get in and talk to the key person. And we've created kind of this barrier to entry now that it's hard to get to the decision makers and get in front of them to kind of pitch, your stuff. You've got B2C in terms of generally a little more marketing, dependent, but now is requiring that human to close the transaction. And I've talked to several clients of late, that are in B2B, but they're selling a product that might be $1,000, and you don't have a lot of margin in $1,000 product to have a human involved in getting a transaction across the finish line. And so once again, I think some of those companies are struggling at the moment, because there's not that buying energy, in the market, that in that, probably, 1,000 and under marketplace, people are still, trying to not make those quick impulse purchases. And then obviously the big sales, though, I mean, like I said, you still got to have the sales there. But from the marketing side, I mean, we're not seeing people cut back their marketing, but we are seeing people question what they are spending for marketing.
Right.
And,
Yeah, exactly.
And you've got to spend it. I mean, we're not advocates of cutting back spend, but I think there's a lot of our clients who've gotten kind of lazy and repetitive and having to reassess, hey, is it really working? And let's try something different. And, and that's, a little bit of a black art. And I think sometimes, that's where you kind of got to get out of your bunker and get out and interact with some other folks and really get some other ideas and test things. And I don't know that anybody truly knows the answer. I mean, it's, sometimes people have just found unusual success in a niche where they just didn't think that there were customers there, and then they found it. And others are just spending and just nothing, no drips happening, in that process. So I think the key is just don't be afraid to change it up and really, try something different.
Yeah, and a great example, we'll plug the Simple Numbers 2.0 there when you talk about launch capital. Greg uses a great example with Brandon's client, talking about using marketing as a launch capital and how to measure that return on investment there, which is good.
Yeah, and and now and that example came in a time where the market was expanding, but there again, I mean, it can still happen, and then there's some areas, where it certainly is, but I think that the thing is this is a time like none other, and I keep repeating that to every group that I talk to is, listen, you can't use patterns of the past right now as effectively as we've used it, in times past. This is a different marketplace that has conditions that have never existed at the same time. And the main, idea there is the fact of just the labor component. We've never had a situation where there's functionally no unemployment anywhere, any industry in the country. And same with other developed countries as well. Canada, there's no unemployment up in Canada. Australia, there's no unemployment in Australia. I mean, those are just unheard of conditions. And, and so once again, we've got to look at the marketplace with fresh eyes and make fresh plans. And I think we've got to keep our head on a swivel to be looking at really 3-month tranches of where you're going. I mean, if you really just forget an annual plan right now, there's too many questions about what's going to happen in the next 24 months that, I mean, you can do it if you want to, but if you want to do a 5-year plan, you want to do a 10-year plan, I'm going to happy to take the bet that I'm going to show up 5 years from now or 10 years from now and look back at you making that plan and saying, was it worth the time and effort to do that? And the answer is probably not, because we're at an inflection point, I think, in terms of which way and how the economy is going to react. And so I'm going to put a much, much higher value on quarterly planning. Now, I get setting major ideas of where you're headed. I'm not throwing that out, but to do our business coach, Rob Simons, was in town over the weekend, and we were talking, and he said one of the clients that he works with does 100-year plan. I tell you, when a client of his, it was actually a company that he knew, from his market, and they would go off and do 100-year plan, and that company actually had just recently declared bankruptcy. And it's like, well, how good that 100-year plan doing for you right now? Because they basically got blindsided, by one major event, and so this is the kind of market that we're in. That all of those things sound lovely, when money's flowing, you're profitable, and you want to go to some cool place to do a corporate retreat. Yeah. I'm saying, folks, we gotta double down on just good functional business understanding and grind it out right now. And I know that's not exciting. That's not the fluffy thing, that everybody wants to hear, but it's like, hey, I'd rather be a realist than an optimist and a pessimist. So,
well, and if you're able to maintain profitability, maintain a good labor force while you do it, listen, opportunities are going to be there because there's a lot of people out there who aren't doing it. Trust me, I know they call, and there will be opportunities if you're able to do that. Just again, following what we've talked about with our cash flow, 5 forces of cash flow, making sure you're at that core capital target, because there's going to be opportunities in the market to go out and make an impact when the chips are down for some others.
Yep.
Let me land the plane here. We talked about a lot of things, so I'm going to kind of give everybody their checklist, you may say, for what do I do with all the information we've given you. So get a pencil down, or get a pencil out and write this down. So here's kind of what you want to do. So the first thing is, am I at the profit target I should be at? So minimally, in just about every case, I need to be 15% of my gross margin. If I'm not there, then I've got to do some evaluations. If I am, great, let's keep doing what we're doing, keep our head on a swivel. If I'm not there, then I've got to decide, okay, which route am I going to take to get to 15%? Am I going to cut labor, or am I going to grow into my current labor cost? As we just discussed, growing into your current labor cost is rather difficult in the current marketplace. Now, you might go steal market share, but to get there strictly by increasing prices or just having a line of people that wants to purchase from you, good luck. That's going to be difficult to happen. So if I'm going to then cut to get to my profit target, I've got to evaluate particularly my management labor structure. It might be direct, but what we're seeing most of the time, it's admin management labor. Evaluate it, have them track their time. What is everybody spending time on? What is the non-necessary tasks? And as Greg said, you got to make it work within that salary cap. If I'm going to grow into my footprint, which, like we said, is going to be difficult, but it can be done from that standpoint, I got to evaluate first all my marketing efforts. Am I getting return on all of my marketing spend? And if I'm not, I've either got to divert that spend into areas I can get a higher return in, which typically don't last very long, so you got to be very nimble, or I've got to cut out that spend. If it's not generating return, I got to make that decision from there. And I've got to make sure that I have deal makers, not deal takers, with my sales team. They've got to be able to go out and kill something and bring it back home from that standpoint. And I've got to know what the target is. So I back into, given the labor structure I have today, what have I got to grow to, like Greg illustrated at the beginning of the call. So you kind of get to choose which direction you want to go in. Like we said, the market right now is probably telling you it's more so of a cut environment than a grow environment. But either way, if you want us to take a look at that and kind of help you out in calculating those, just let us know. We're happy to do so.
Awesome. Well, thanks guys for getting on here and sharing your insights. For Brandon, Greg, I'm Mike. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one.
All right.
See you guys.
See ya.
If you want to know more about driving sustainable profitability for your business, or are interested in learning more about CRI Simple Numbers, please visit our website at simplenumberscri.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of Profitability Playbook, the Simple Numbers podcast. You can subscribe to Profitability Playbook on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. If you liked what you heard today, please leave us a review. The views expressed on Profitability Playbook, the Simple Numbers podcast, are those of the presenter and moderator and do not necessarily reflect the views of CRI Simple Numbers or the CRI family of companies. This podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional advice received directly. Consult with your CRI Simple Numbers advisor or another trusted professional if you have questions about your specific situation.